on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:06. It's Friday in the nation's capital, and you found the right place. You found just what you've been looking for. In fact, we're going to finish up your week strong and then send you right into the weekend with everything you need to know. It's O'Connor and Company with Larry and Patrice Onwuka. Good morning, Patrice.
Happy Friday as we vibe into the Friday.
Are you vibing right now with David Bowie? Nice,
yeah.
As well you should. 6:35, Art Baker running for Congress in Maryland. That'll be in 30 minutes. Then 7:05, Senator Ron Johnson thinks maybe we shouldn't open the gates to America for, Hamas-supporting Gazan refugees. It's a humble request. He'll talk about it. Yeah. 7:35, Rich Anderson, chairman of the Republican Party in Virginia. And then at 8:35, Byron Donalds, congressman from Florida, one of my favorites. Yeah, he is a very good guy.
I saw him on the Hill the other day. He's jacked.
He's a big man, yeah. And he was on George Washington University campus, and some of the protesters called him an Uncle Tom and a race traitor. Don't you love that, Patrice?
I do. These, yeah, I do. I'm going to reserve my comments for when he's on.
Do you, though? All right. So yet another brouhaha that the White House is trying to clean up. Here's the backstory. President Joe Biden gave an interview. We don't have the actual audio to the interview for some reason, actually. But it was a print interview that he gave, and when asked about, I'll just quote him directly, or I'll quote the article. This is an article written, this is the write-up at Fox News. President Biden made remarks extolling the virtues and benefits of immigration on Wednesday. It was at a fundraiser. That's why we don't have the audio. They usually don't record fundraisers. But here's what he was quoted as saying. This election is about freedom. Is it? America and democracy. So that's what this election is about. Freedom, America, and democracy. That's why I badly need you to give me billions of dollars. Okay, he didn't say that part. You know, one of the reasons why our economy is growing? I'm sorry, I can't read this without fact-checking him. Our economy is not growing. Is our economy growing? Is that what the data suggests?
1.6% last quarter. It's actually stumbling.
Which will be adjusted down, I'm sure. And by the way, inflation is over 3% still, so that offsets whatever growth that we might have. Of
course.
All right. You know, one of the reasons why our economy is growing is because of you and many others. Why? Because we welcome immigrants. Why is China stalling so badly economically? Why is Japan having trouble? Why is Russia? Why is India? Because they're xenophobic.
That is outrageous.
He's called our allies, Russia and India, xenophobic. And these are very important allies to us. So a reporter asked Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday to sort of, wait a minute, why did the president call our allies xenophobic?
So the president last night described Japan as xenophobic along with China and Russia. Was that intentional? And does the president want to apologize to Japan?
I think the broader case that he was trying to make, which I think most leaders and allies across the globe understand, is he was saying that when it comes to who we are as a nation, we are a nation of immigrants. That is in our DNA. And so you've heard the president say this, and you've heard us say it more as an administration. It makes us better. We're stronger for it because of the fact that in our DNA we are a nation of immigrants, and I think that's probably very important to note as well. And that's what the broader sense.
All right, so I mean, obviously you'd be forgiven for not understanding that word salad gobbledygook, because I don't think Karine Jean-Pierre, actually I think English is her second language. So can I translate? Because I speak Karine Jean-Pierre.
Please.
I'm fluent in this language. I know exactly what she was saying. Listen. It was really a backhanded attack on Donald Trump and MAGA fascist supporters. They hate immigrants. They're racist. They're xenophobic. So it was his way of attacking them, and Japan and India just got caught in the crossfire. So leave it alone. If you're attacking Trump and MAGA fascist, he can say whatever he wants.
Okay, that's the translation?
That's my interpretation of what he said.
All right. My takeaway is I have no clue what he said. Oh my gosh, how can I dance around this while I'm talking? Let me just say something and then circle back to say it again like it's a fourth grade paper where I need to fill the page and I'm just using the same words over and over and over again.
Just keep saying immigration is in our DNA. Say it enough times.
Immigration is in our DNA. It's really tested well. I know that's a fallback line. Let me just keep saying it while I try to figure out what else to say. It should be, I mean, our allies should be irate that they are being called xenophobic for wanting to protect, for determining their own sovereignty, protecting their sovereignty. And frankly, why is it that we should be taking illegal immigrants, people who are coming, illegal immigrants, number one, but also people coming from Gaza who are noted anti-Semitics,
right?
Who maybe and very likely are Hamas supporters.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
How is that? How is it xenophobic not to want those folks?
The question of the refugees came up a little bit later, but here's the best thing. This isn't even about our immigration policies because now he's attacking other countries.
Yeah.
Because Japan and India actually says, you know what, we got enough people here to take care of and we don't need any immigration. Forget about refugees. We don't need immigration.
What, 2 billion people?
And he's saying, your economy stinks right now because you won't take, I'll take India's economy, actually, now that I think about it. All right. So the reporter comes back.
Okay.
And says, no, he clearly insulted this country.
Yes.
And then Karine Jean-Pierre does my favorite thing, pretends as though Joe Biden was very clear about his statement. This is the gaslighting. I read you the statement. One of the reasons our economy is growing is because we welcome immigrants. China's stalling. Japan's having trouble. Russia, India, because they are xenophobic. Okay? That's very clear. So now listen.
The word xenophobic is a very pejorative and negative word, particularly to use against an ally. Is that what he meant?
Look, the president was very clear, and I think...
He wasn't very clear. I mean, that's why we're asking you.
Well, look, here's what...
I'm going to let her finish, but I love whoever this reporter is.
That sounds like Phil Wegman.
I think you're right.
It sounds like Phil.
I think it was Wegman because I've used to hearing his voice.
Me too. And frankly, the kinds of questions very few
and
reporters...
telling Chris DeGaulle that he loves him, if you remember. Yeah, Phil Wegman's our favorite. I think you're right. It's Phil Wegman from Real Clear Politics.
Yes, I think so.
And so she says, the president was very clear, and Phil says, he wasn't very clear. That's why we're asking you. Because clearly, and by the way, I will say this.
Yeah.
Actually, Joe Biden was very clear. Here's what he said. Again, why is China stalling so badly economically? Why is Japan having trouble? Why is Russia? Why is India? Because they are xenophobic. That is very clear. She's just trying to spin it into something. He was really just praising our immigration policy. No, he was not praising our immigration policy. He was calling our allies xenophobic for not having our immigration policy. All right, so here she is she's gonna explain how clear the president was.
I'm saying he was talking about who we are as a country, right? He was talking about the importance about being in a country of immigrants, especially as you see the attacks that we have seen very recently in the last couple of years on those attacks on immigrants in particular. And so it is important for us to remember that we are a country of immigrants. I'm explaining what he was talking about and how he was what he was focusing on in those comments.
Wait, if he was so clear, why do you have to explain what he was talking about?
If I were her, I would say no comment.
Right. We're done with this.
And walk away.
Yeah, well.
But she's digging a deeper hole.
She's incapable. And she's so arrogant in her superiority that we're the better people, don't you understand?
Except the arrogance up here in her head doesn't translate out to what comes out of her lips.
A little bit more. She had a tough day yesterday because now she has to explain why Biden isn't saying anything about the protests. And, you mentioned the refugee story about bringing in Gazans, Hamas-supporting Gazans into this country.
Gazans,
we'll get into that too. More Karine Jean-Pierre trying to dance around the reality of her situation in just a moment. But first, it's 6:15.
WMAL, making sense of the forecast. Because you never know what Mother Nature has in store. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Before I head to North Carolina, I wanted to speak for a few moments about what's going on our college campuses here. We've all seen the images, and they put to the test two fundamental American principles. The first is the right to free speech and for people to peacefully assemble and make their voices heard. The second is the rule of law. Both must be upheld.
Joe Biden yesterday finally, after 10 days of silence, forced to say something after the morning cable shows did nonstop coverage of the police clearing the encampment at UCLA. So finally he comes out and says something. By the way, this is a day after Karine Jean-Pierre insisted he's been saying stuff about it. He's been talking about it. We're constantly. No, he hasn't. Otherwise, why would he have to feel compelled yesterday to come out and give this written word? But what he just said there, it puts to the test the right to free speech and the law. No, there isn't a hard test there.
No.
If you break encamping on private property and refusing to allow entry, taking over space like this.
That's right.
Refusing people entry because of their ethnicity or religion.
Talk about racism.
Destroying things, vandalizing things.
Yes.
There's nothing about that is free speech. And this isn't hard. They're trying to make it so, I just want to bend over backwards and make sure I support free speech. This isn't free speech. There's nothing about it that's free speech.
And since when did they become defenders of freedom of speech?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, for the past how many years has President Biden and the Biden administration wanted to censor speech, whether it's on vaccine mandates or a sundry other topics?
Thank you.
So the other thing that I found frustrating, and I'm starting to see this, is that he's calling out anti-Semitism. At the same time, he also has to he feels compelled to call out Islamophobia.
Oh yes, every single time.
As though there's an equal amount of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in society and on campuses.
That's right.
There is not. I mean, you might have a one-off here or there making Islamic statements, but it is nothing 100%. Proportionally compared to how much anti-Semitic hate, Jew hate, Jewish hate, anti-Israel hate going on campuses and frankly across our society right now. So maybe President Biden, instead of all the time you spent talking about white supremacy since you've been in office and we're running for office, maybe you should have spent that time talking about just the prejudice across society, including anti-Semitism, because that's where we're seeing this.
And listen, of course, every time you state something as forcefully as you just did, Patrice, and I love it, you always say, of course, there may be a one-off of Islamophobia. But here's the thing. Have you seen it? I mean, certainly in the last 2 weeks during these things, is there anti-Islam sentiment being expressed on these college campuses? Of course not.
No.
But you still feel compelled to bend over backwards and say that. And Biden had to say it in the exact same breath. Just like we don't like anti-Semitism, we don't like that. And you know why he has to say that? He keeps touting this commission that he put together to combat anti-Semitism. You know who sits on that commission to combat anti-Semitism? Representatives of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, who have in the past been tied to terrorist organizations. So their only contribution on that panel, on that blue ribbon commission, is to say anytime you mention anti-Semitism, make sure you mention what we have to deal with in our Islamophobia. All right, so the reporters asked Karine Jean-Pierre about the president's statement yesterday.
The president said today that there are always those who rush in to score political points. This isn't a moment for politics. Did he feel political pressure to speak out now? And it's notable that he's doing it after Donald Trump has started to ramp up his criticism of how the president has responded to these campus protests. Why did it take him so long to make this remarks today?
I want to be careful because you asked me about Donald Trump, who's also, of course, a former president, but also a candidate in this presidential cycle for the other side, obviously. And so I want to be really, really mindful. But the president, when it comes to something like this, he doesn't need to follow anyone or follow someone else. We've been really consistent, I believe.
No, they really haven't, and that's why he had to come out and state something, because they haven't been consistent. And by the way, another thing, standing up for the rule of law, because that's what this was meant to be, that he's on the side of the rule of law. He did this after the tough decisions were made. This is after the California Highway Patrol cleared out UCLA. This is after the NYPD cleared out Columbia. After he's leading from behind here. He waited for local mayors and governors to make the tough decision and call the police in. He didn't lead. It's not like 5 days ago when we saw all this happening, or 10 days ago. He said, no, this has to end. Students deserve a right to their campus. They deserve a right to have their graduation. And governors should call in the police right now and end this thing. He waited for all those tough decisions to be made and then follows up afterwards saying, let me be clear, please.
That's a really good point, because real leadership would have recognized that if you don't squelch this when it is just bubbling up, when it's small, when it's a bud, then it's going to blossom into a wild field of aggression, which it has now. He could have said to the universities, actually, you need to stop this. And if you do not feel equipped to stop this, bring in your local police. And he never did.
One last statement she made, by the way, she was asked about refugees and the fact that President Trump decried the idea, and not just, they always make it about Trump. Vast majorities of Americans in commentary had said this is a bad idea to bring in these Hamas supporting. I want to keep reiterating. When you bring in a refugee from Gaza, the odds are you're bringing somebody in who hates Israel, thinks America is the great Satan, and supports Hamas. And she was asked about that and whether that story is true and whether there will be any vetting.
As it relates to vetting and making sure that we are vetting folks who are coming to do that, that is something that we take very, very seriously.
Oh, there you go. I feel better now. They take that very seriously. I mean, just look at all the great vetting they've been doing on our southern border with the 8 million people who are in this country. Senator Ron Johnson is going to join us to talk about that issue in particular, this idea of Hamas refugees. That's coming in at 7:05. Right now it's 6:23.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:36. It's O'Connor and Company. Thanks for tuning in here on this Friday in your nation's capital. We got you covered right up to when your weekend begins here on WMAL. Coming up at 7:05, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, 7:35, Rich Anderson, chairman of the Virginia Republican Party, and at 8:35, Representative Byron Donalds of Florida. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Patrice Onwuka.
Happy Friday, Larry.
Happy Friday to you, too. And it's always nice to have a candidate for Congress from Maryland. You know, we got because you and I are the only Marylanders on this show.
I know.
Everybody, well, that's not true. Our executive producer Heather Hunter is also
Maryland.
a Marylander too. But I actually happen to live in the Third Congressional District, so this guy wants to be my representative.
Oh, so he needs to win your vote.
At the very least, and many others. Art Baker joins us now, and of course, the website is Art for Maryland, and the primary early voting has begun now for the primary of May 14th. Yes. So this is the home stretch, Mr. Baker. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Larry and Patrice, for having me. Really appreciate it.
Good morning.
I love the bio. You're a former FBI agent, former actor and voice performer, and a former radio DJ. Wow, that's quite a journey to Congress.
Yes, and I've actually done about 7 years on Capitol Hill.
Oh, wow.
You have in what capacity?
I was detailed from the FBI to the House Judiciary Committee for about 5 years, working on various pieces of legislation.
Oh, terrific.
And then I retired in 2017 and was recruited to go back up and do some work on House Judiciary, and then the Senate Judiciary Committee working for Mr. Lindsey Graham, looking at some of the allegations and improprieties alleged that the FBI had done on the presidential campaigns and whatnot.
Well, this is great because it seems like one of the lead candidates to get the Democrat nomination. It's a very crowded field. There's like 10 trying to get the Democrat nomination. But Harry Dunn has been endorsed by Jim Clyburn, Nancy Pelosi, Benny Thompson. He's that former Capitol Police officer who broke down in tears during the January 6th hearing. They're going to try to rally around him as this, person championing law enforcement. And, of course, the entire race will be about January 6th. Well, and race, actually, of the different sort. So tell me how you're going to differentiate yourself, first of all, from your Republican field and how you might go about winning this seat.
Well, I think as far as differentiating myself from the Republican field, we have 9 candidates, and we've all come out. Well, I would say about half of us have come out to various functions, and I think I distinguish myself by what you alluded to. I have a lot of diverse experience, crime and justice, and getting some law and order back into Maryland and into this country are certainly my primary platforms, but there's a lot of other issues to deal with, certainly. And when I participated in these events, I think my experience really distinguishes myself. I'm an older candidate. I've been around the block a few times. So I think as far as the Republican candidates, it's easy to distinguish myself. Getting to the general election, where we have 22 Democratic candidates running in the 3rd District.
Thank you. Yeah, that's how many they've got. Thank you.
And as you've alluded to, we have this rallying around Harry Dunn, and I'm certainly not going to disparage any candidate, but I'm certainly not going to disparage anybody who's carried a badge and a gun, knowing the difficult job they have. But Mr. Dunn, as I think is pretty well been pointed out, does not live in the 3rd District, as you and I do. And I'm not exactly sure what his role was on the events of January 6th. There's a lot he has running on TV and his ads and whatnot, but I'm not exactly clear what his role was. So I would really enjoy going toe-to-toe with him, or really any of the Democratic candidates, because I think my message of conservatism is one that's long overdue, and I think people in Maryland are longing for a return to some normalcy here.
Well, to pick up on that thread, when we look right now at what's going on in Washington, one of the big issues is just massive spending. And when you consider that a lot of Marylanders can't afford to spend the way that, they're seeing their representatives use the taxpayers like a credit card with no limit, what would you do if you get there to Washington to really push back and be an advocate for those fiscal conservative principles and values?
Well, thank you very much, Patrice, for that point. And I want to say, as I've gone around and putting up signs and whatnot, there is one Democratic candidate running for Senate. If she has one sign at a location, she has 6 signs at a location. And I was at an intersection going down Connecticut Avenue yesterday. There's some construction going on, so I sat for a while. From one vantage point, I was able to count in excess of 20 signs that this candidate had put up. Now, if that's the way you spend your campaign money, how are you going to spend the taxpayer money? And more to your point about what I would do, I would go line by line across everything that Uncle Sam is spending from the taxpayer's wallet, and like a wash rag that you can wring out water even though you think it's dry, pull back, claw back some of this money that is going to some of these frivolous programs that absolutely do nothing to address the real world, real life issues that face people that are getting up and going to work every morning.
You say, Art Baker, that battling crime and instilling public safety is going to be a big agenda for you as a member of the House of Representatives. And that's a big agenda item for people who live in the district. Crime has gotten much, much worse recently. What are your plans there, and how can you do that?
Yes, sir. It certainly is an agenda item for me. I have spent 35 years carrying a badge and gun, sworn to protect the people of this country. I was a Baltimore County police officer, so I have local experience as well. I think the first thing to do to address this, what's really an unprecedented crime problem, is to let the police do their jobs. That would be the very first thing. You can go in and do some tinkering with other things that might need to be done, but these feel-good programs, pick people up, take them to have a hot meal rather than to the booking station, that's all got to stop. It's all got to stop. We've got to let the cops do their jobs. Policing is a very difficult job anyway, but the legislature in Maryland has seen fit to make it even more difficult. They stripped law enforcement officers of the due process rights that they had. I watched one of the candidates on television last night, one of the Democratic candidates, touting her accomplishments, and she spent some time on gun control and what she's done for gun control in Maryland. But all she's done, and all anybody in Maryland politics has done for gun control, is to make it more difficult for law-abiding citizens who are following the rules in carrying a concealed weapon, making it more difficult for them to understand what the law is. The politicians never, ever, ever understand that bad people, criminal-inclined people, don't follow laws. That's why they're criminals.
Wait,
they're not going to follow gun control rules.
You're telling me the people who wake up in the morning and are willing to break the laws against armed robbery and murder are going to be stopped because they might be breaking a gun ownership violation? I don't know, Art Baker. That's some crazy talk. Listen, we got to leave it there. Good luck in the race. He's running for the Republican nomination for Maryland's 3rd District. This is an open seat, many open seats in Maryland this year, so it is prime for the taking. The early balloting is happening right now, early voting, and the actual primary is May 14th. It's artformaryland.com. Good luck, Art.
Thanks, Art.
Thanks, both of you. All
right, Patrice. Donald Trump was back in court yesterday.
Okay.
By the way, just a quick pet peeve. They keep calling it a hush money trial. I've said this over and over again. It's either lazy or it's purposely inaccurate. Whenever you hear somebody calling this a hush money trial, they're either being lazy and uninformed and ignorant, and they're displaying that for you, or they're deliberately trying to paint Trump in the worst possible light. This is a falsifying business records trial.
Exactly.
He is accused of falsifying business records. Now, the business records that he's accused of being falsifying were what he called legal fee payments to Michael Cohen. Michael Cohen, the convicted perjurer, claims that it was really, they did that to hide the truth. It was really payments to a couple of women for non-disclosure agreements.
Yeah.
Either way, which some people are calling hush money, which is not hush money.
And it's not illegal.
So, again, it just drives me crazy. Every time I hear it, it's fingernails on the chalkboard, and it reveals, again, either your ignorance or your bias. Thank you. That said, on his way into the courtroom, he had plenty to say about the campus protests. Many believe that this is what sort of eventually got Joe Biden to say something a few hours later.
I will comment just quickly on the colleges and universities. It's a shame. I'm so proud of the New York's finest. They're great people, too. I know so many of them. They're incredible. They did a job at Columbia. And likewise in Los Angeles, they did a really good job at UCLA. It was very much embedded. And just so you understand, this is the radical left. This is a movement from the left, not from the right. The right is not your problem. Despite what law enforcement likes to say, the FBI director said that he worries about the right. No, don't worry about the right. The right's fine. Worry about the left, because this is a movement from the left. These are radical left lunatics. And they got to be stopped now, because it's going to go on, and it's going to get worse and worse.
Yes, it is, especially through the election. He's very smart to do this. I keep hearing that you got to be worried and scared about the right and the violence and the. This is very smart of him to say, use your eyes, look at what's happening. You don't have a problem with conservatives. The problem is on the left.
And by conservatives, we also tag on Christian. They call them Christian nationalists. They call them white supremacists. You know, all of those basket of deplorables. That's who they are not the problem. We are not the problem.
Right.
The problem is on the other side of the aisle.
And by the way, later on, we've got a pretty good example of, I believe, our conservatives, maybe even white Christians on college campuses from Ole Miss to Rutgers to University of Michigan even, kind of finally taking things into their own hands and peacefully, lovingly, just like those frat boys down at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill we talked about, really pushing back on these protesters. It's amazing, and we'll share that with you a little later in the program. It's 6:52.